Richard Scott say that I, or indeed anybody else, intended to mislead Parliament, and he says absolutely clearly that we had no intent to mislead.
As for Sir Nicholas Lisle, the Attorney-General, many felt he was in the firing line because of his handling of the Matrix Churchill trial and refusal to allow key government documents to be seen by defence lawyers. Sir Richard strongly criticises Sir Nicholas Lisle's decision to tell ministers to sign public interest immunity certificates, so-called gagging orders. I do not regard this advice as having any sound legal foundation, he said. But he added that ministers, including the Attorney-General, were entitled to rely on advice from their lawyers and could not be blamed for following it.
Sir Nicholas, you are sharply criticised in this report. Should you not resign?
Certainly not. And furthermore, it's quite plain that my legal advice was very carefully given and well-founded, and that the judge saw every relevant document and there was a fair trial.
But specifically, Sir Richard contradicts you on that. He says, specifically, I do not regard the advice as having any sound legal foundation.
Well, lawyers differ. I took top legal advice, and the advice that I gave is supported by a whole run of cases.
But as William Waldegrave left the Treasury tonight, determined to stay in his job, Labour promised to keep up the pressure on him and Sir Nicholas Lisle, their researchers still poring over the Scott report, arming themselves for a fresh onslaught tomorrow. QPIM News at 10, Westminster.
Let's go now to our political editor, Michael Brunson at Westminster. Mike, for the time being, no resignations. Are the government off the hook?
Yes, they are, for the time being. That, I think, is because Ian Lang did a very effective job in getting two key points out into the public domain quickly. First, the point that while there may have been a cock-up, there wasn't a conspiracy. He got that across quite quickly. And secondly, the idea that while ministers may have been fools, they were not knaves. And all of that backed up, as he showed, with the conclusions reached by Sir Richard Scott. Though in the latter case of the ministers, it does depend on really only a couple of key sentences in this huge volume. And then we had Robin Cook, and he, if you like, opened up the political can of worms, because he went into all the great detail in the rest of the report. And he showed that if there was a cock-up, it was such a monumental cock-up that in his view the government was entirely and wholly to blame. And it's really going to depend, in my view, on whether Labour and the Liberal Democrats, I mean, Campbell came in with some very effective concrete examples, as you saw, if they can, whether or not they can sustain that political attack, that is what in the end will see the government through or not.
Sir Richard draws this fine line between ministers who behaved badly but who did so without deceit or without malice, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. But I should make absolutely clear there is no question whatsoever of any of those ministers resigning tonight, and that has the full backing of the Prime Minister in Downing Street.
What about the cancer of secrecy in government that Sir Richard attacks so strongly?
It's summed up, you know, in a little quoted paragraph here, right at the end of the report, page 1801. A failure by ministers, says Sir Richard, to meet the obligations of accountability undermines, in my opinion, the democratic process. That's his view. The counterattack, though, is beginning tonight. There's a little bit of the rubbishing coming back of the Scott report. Ministers pointing out, well, for heaven's sake, Sir Richard should realise we were dealing here with arms sales, they say. How can you be fully open about arms sales? Also drawing all the time on the business that ministers did what they had to do, that they should not be held responsible for doing an honest job. That is the counterattack that really is beginning tonight.
Michael Brunson, thank you. Away from the detail of who did and said what, Sir Richard Scott remarked that he was quite saddened by some things he'd found. He said there was example after example of an apparent failure of ministers to be accountable. There was too much secrecy, not enough information passing between government departments, and information being kept from Parliament and from the public. ITN's Kevin Dunn looks at these broader issues.
After 3.5 years, Sir Richard Scott left home for his inquiry officers for the last time. He declined to anticipate the response of the government to his report, but there was no shortage of anticipation among the journalists who scrambled to obtain their copies. So big they came in boxes, so eagerly awaited they were biked to newsrooms. It consists of 5 volumes and an index running to some 2,000 pages and retailing at £45. And it is the most exhaustive examination for a generation of how we are governed. Buying his copy, Paul Henderson, the principal defendant in the Matrix Churchill trial, whose collapse prompted the inquiry.
I'm just looking forward to reading it.
But what did Sir Richard have to say of the Matrix Churchill case? The three machine tool exporters faced possible prison sentences until the disclosure of documents showed the government knew all along they were shipping weapons-making equipment to Iraq. But Customs, who prosecuted the case, failed to check their defence that they had been encouraged by the government.
I take it as self-evident that a case which collapses before the conclusion of the prosecution is, with the benefit of hindsight, a case that should never have been brought.
The judge was equally critical of the so-called gagging orders, the public interest immunity certificates which ministers signed to withhold government documents. Sir Richard said that had no precedent in a criminal trial and they should not be used so broadly again.
In a nutshell, he finds that PII have little or no place in criminal trials. He says the Attorney General was wrong to advise ministers that they had a duty to sign them, and the Attorney General was wrong to advise them to cover vast amounts of documents.
But above all, the judge was critical of the secrecy at the heart of government. He found example after example of failures by ministers to keep Parliament and the public fully informed, and he called for a review of that culture.
At the end of the day, I hope it will assist a movement towards more openness in government and a reduction of what has sometimes been, in a slightly soundbite way, called the culture of secrecy in Whitehall.
That was Sir Richard's final word. With that, he left to go on holiday, but his report will reverberate through Whitehall for weeks to come. Kevin Dunn, News at 10, Westminster.
Now, today's other news. A bomb said to bear all the hallmarks of the IRA brought the West End of London to a standstill today. It was found and made safe after coded warning calls were received. The IRA had earlier said it would continue its bombing campaign for as long as necessary. Terry Lloyd reports.
Less than a week after the Canary Wharf bomb and terror returned to the streets of London. Theatreland, which had been crowded with tourists just minutes earlier, was evacuated after a series of coded messages. Mid-afternoon in the capital, and this was the scene. The streets were deserted, apart from 2 police vans, which were sent into the area which had by then been deemed the danger zone. One of the many police officers tasked to patrol the streets since the ceasefire was called off spotted an explosive device inside a telephone kiosk in the popular Shaftesbury Avenue area. Bomb squad officers sent in a robot to carry out a controlled explosion to eliminate the danger. It was swift and safe, despite the lethal makeup of the bomb.
After a number of coded messages that were received shortly after 12:30 p.m. today, explosives officers have made safe a device which has now been taken away for forensic examination.
The robot was followed in by sniffer dogs checking for further devices. It took several hours before the scene was given the all clear and roads were reopened and office workers and tourists were allowed to move back beyond the taped-off areas. Here in the very heart of the tourist area is where the IRA left their bomb inside this very telephone kiosk. It was placed inside a red sports holdall, and forensic experts now believe it contained between £1 and £5 of Semtex, a material widely used by the IRA. The windows are now smudged. That's because scene of crime officers have been checking for fingerprints. Terry Lloyd, News at 10, Central London.
Still ahead on News at 10 tonight, after that London bomb, a new warning tonight from Jerry Adams. Good for the heart, the patient whose operation could revolutionize bypass surgery. And why Britain's loneliest schoolboy may soon be forced to swap this for this.
This is Her Majesty's Treasury. It's a very exclusive place. I had to disguise myself with some money just to get in. National Savings is backed by the Treasury, so it's the only financial organisation that can guarantee unique, inflation-proof, tax-free investments. Because you won't find a Her Majesty's Treasury in your local shopping centre, National Savings have set up shop in 5 papers, the same place, on the same days, week in, week out. So you can see what's new and invest in your own time. Now I'll just sneak out before I end up with someone's premium bomb winnings. Which way was it? I think it was this way, wasn't it?
Beryl doesn't look too happy, does she? And you know why that is? It's her birthday, and the doormat's a bit light on birthday cards. Actually, what really happened was this. There were plenty of cards. Do you know why?
It's me, Mum. Don't forget Gran's birthday. Helen, before you go on holiday, send Gran a card, all right? I know you're broke, Tom, so I've got you a card. You can sign it when you come over, all right? I'd like to order some flowers, please.
Don't ask me why women ring round more than men. Maybe they care more. I know one thing, though. When they get on the blower, things happen.
Oh, the flowers are beautiful. And I had a lovely lot of cards.
It's good to talk. Behave yourself.
The new Mitsubishi Charisma needs no beautiful models. No exotic locations. And no expensive photography. And no groovy theme music. The new Mitsubishi Charisma. Some cars have it, some don't.
Going on holiday? You should be going to a place that'll give you more holiday for your money. With our fantastic discounts, shouldn't you be going places with going places?
Brian Johnson, award-winning architect.
It gives you a feeling of comfort, so yes, it's very nice to be able to use the limousine.
Kavita Chowdhury, award-winning filmmaker.
It is nice to be in your seat doing your work while you're traveling.
And Kalfan Har, award-winning sportsman.
I do watch television, movies, sports programs too.
These people have something in common. They fly Emirates, the award-winning airline.
Welcome back. The Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams made an uncompromising speech in West Belfast tonight against the background of more troops arriving in the province. He said it would be difficult to get the IRA to declare another ceasefire, and elections in Northern Ireland could be a recipe for disaster. O-Island correspondent John Irvine reports.
Any doubts about Gerry Adams' stature within the Republican movement were dispelled tonight.
Chucky Ireland.
The Sinn Féin leader told Republicans in West Belfast that all-party negotiations were the only way of getting the IRA to reinstate the ceasefire, and he warned the Dublin government not to support the British proposal for elections here.
In the present, already dangerous and difficult climate, any willingness by Dublin to accept the Unionist election proposal would not augur well for the period ahead.
Earlier today, the IRA restated that the ceasefire is over. The provisionals added, "We in the IRA will continue to assert Irish national rights in the face of British denial for as long as is necessary." Sinister words given today's attempted bombing. Tonight, the Army released pictures of troop reinforcements being airlifted to security bases along the border. An additional 500 soldiers are being drafted into Northern Ireland. The first arrived from England this morning. The security situation is volatile, the political climate equally uncertain. Tomorrow, Gerry Adams will head to Dublin for talks with Irish government officials. The Irish Prime Minister has refused to meet him, so political contact is to resume. But at this stage, there is nothing to suggest the IRA will quickly recall a ceasefire. John Irvine, News at 10, Belfast.
A supertanker with a full cargo of crude oil, which ran aground in the entrance to Milford Haven in West Wales, was towed off the rocks tonight. The grounding began a pollution scare. One unconfirmed report says that thousands of tons of oil could have been spilled. Boris Yeltsin confirmed today that he will run for a second term as Russian president. His health still seemed distinctly shaky, but he said he was sure he could bring Russia through its turmoil and its worries. Mr. Yeltsin made the announcement in his hometown in the Ural Mountains. Our Moscow correspondent Julian Mannion reports.
It was a day of ceremonies and official visits in Boris Yeltsin's hometown Yekaterinburg, and it clearly tested his stamina. When he came to the podium for his all-important speech, the president paused for breath. Yeltsin apologized to his invited audience for having lost his voice talking to people in the street. But in a lengthy speech, he seemed to find his strength. He said that Russia must not slip back into the past. Other candidates might not be able to resist the opposition. It would be irresponsible if he stepped down in a time of troubles. In an exclusive interview with ITN, the president told me more about the reasons for his decision.
I'm afraid that if someone else becomes president, our reform policies could be reversed. I started them, and I should see them through to the end.
Boris Yeltsin has decided to stand in spite of his poor showing in the opinion polls, the doubts about his health, and some whispers from inside his own entourage that he should step aside in favor of his Prime Minister, Viktor Chernomyrdin. In spite of all that, Yeltsin seems to believe that he can fight and win. But today's packed schedule was just a foretaste of the challenge that Yeltsin has now set himself in what will be a punishing campaign. His second bout of heart trouble late last year has left doubts over whether he can take the strain of a modern election. Today, Yeltsin was talking tough, saying that the war in Chechnya must be brought to a successful conclusion inside a month, and that the rebel leader, General Dudayev, should be shot. But his old opponents, the communists, are running well ahead of him in the polls, and today they chose their leader, Gennady Zyuganov, as their official candidate for president. In Yekaterinburg, Boris Yeltsin visited the grave of his father. It was a time to remember the past, and perhaps also to look forward to the great battle which now lies ahead. Julian Mannion, News at 10, Yekaterinburg.
And Russian soldiers have begun demolishing the Chechen presidential palace, which was destroyed last year during heavy fighting for the capital Grozny. The palace became a symbol of Chechen resistance. Today, a large part of the gutted building collapsed under a huge blast. Surgeons in Bristol have pioneered a radically new way of operating on people who need heart bypass surgery. It's quicker and cheaper than traditional open heart surgery and easier on the patient. It could be used in up to a third of the 23,000 people a year who need such surgery in Britain. Our health editor Lawrence McGinty reports.
Dennis Dummett, the 61-year-old who's the first patient in the world to undergo the new procedure, is back home only 2 days after the operation and is recovering well.
Trifle sore across the chest, but not particularly painful.
Professor Gianni Angelini carried out the operation. He says conventional heart bypass surgery saves lives by restoring a healthy blood supply to the heart, but is expensive because patients need weeks to recover and surgeons need heart-lung machines during the operations.
I would dare to say then you may be able to reduce by half the cost of conventional surgery, which then means for the same money you can do twice as many operations.
The surgeons made a small cut about 3 inches long between 2 ribs. They dealt with one blocked artery by attaching a bypass, a small branch from another artery altogether to bring blood to the heart. Then they dealt with a second blockage by inserting a catheter through the groin and up into the coronary artery. That carried a small balloon which was inflated and deflated to push back the blockage. A third of patients who undergo conventional surgery could be suitable for the new technique. That's 7,000 patients a year facing less pain and a faster recovery from an operation that saves the NHS money.
An Orkney boy whose schooling costs 5 times as much as it would take to send him to Eton is having to move. Gramercy Primary School, where he's the only pupil, is closing. He'll have to take a boat trip to learn with other children for the first time. ITN's Adrian Britton reports.
He must be the loneliest schoolboy in Britain. 9 years old, and Kevin Pepper has no classmates, no friends on his remote Orkney Island home, 20 miles off John O'Groats.
Can you say the alphabet for me, please?
A, B,
As the only pupil at Grahamsey Island School, Kevin is one of Britain's most expensive children to educate. Now, education officials say they can't afford the £60,000 a year it costs to run the school, and that Kevin should use a new daily ferry service to attend lessons on the Orkney mainland.
It's lonely, but it's fun, because at other schools sometimes you get picked on.
This is the school they want him to attend. They say it's unnatural for a 9-year-old boy to grow up on his own. Kevin is the child of a dying community, and ahead of him lies an uncomfortable journey into being just like any other schoolboy. Adrian Britton, News at 10, the Orkney Islands.
The main headline again tonight: the government insists there'll be no resignations in the wake of the Scott report. So for Sir Richard Scott, 3.5 years of hard work finally over. Sir Richard, the cycling judge, presided over 87 days of evidence. His report, over 1,800 pages long, would take 45 hours to read at an average speed. Opposition parties employed speed readers to do it more swiftly. Now, for Sir Richard Scott at least, it's time for a holiday. He leaves tomorrow. His destination and his holiday reading are for now unknown. That's it from all of us here at ITN. Until tomorrow, good night.
Hello, good evening. Remarkably mild in parts of the north today, but that will only serve to make the change back to cold weather feel even more uncomfortable. It will be uncomfortable over the next few days. Very cold weather coming back from the north and east. This is how today's chart looked. It's very mild today because we've had winds in from the west around the area of high pressure there. Temperatures as high as 13 in places. But look how the chart changes through the weekend. By Sunday evening, low pressure in charge, bitterly cold northeasterly winds, and must expect some more sleet and snow. As far as tonight's concerned, well, there is a weather front around coming in from the north and west, bringing outbreaks of rain. It'll cross Scotland into Northern Ireland overnight. Further south, mostly dry, temperatures down to around 2 in places, and that's low enough for 1 or 2 patches of ice on the roads. The weather front moving further south during tomorrow morning, the rain getting lighter all the time. As it clears away by about lunchtime, you find no more than the odd spot in the south and east. And there's brighter weather coming on behind, but lots of showers for the north and west, and they're turning more wintry across the north of Scotland, as you can see. And it will turn colder through the day, the colder air coming down from the north, strong winds, a temperature of only 6. Winter's coming back.
Sponsored by Powergen, producing electricity, whatever the weather.
The family of a Midland student murdered in France say the police aren't doing enough to catch the killer. Crime Stalker takes up the case after Central News.
I got chills, they're multiplying, and I'm losing control. Those new yogurts you're supplying, they're electrifying.
Better shave off, there's more fruit and bio, to keep your taste buds satisfied. Better shave off, the fat is very low, the creamy taste is nice inside.
Are you sure?
Just sit back and open wide.
You're the one that I want.
You are the one I want.
New St. Ivel Shape.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's good news. DFS make you an offer that will not be matched.
Britain's leading upholstery specialist offers you a huge choice of sofas, settees, chairs and suites.
Factory direct prices on everything we make.
A guarantee of quality and free delivery.
And right now, you can choose anything with confidence, paying nothing until September.
No deposit.
No interest.
No payment.
And then take 4 years interest-free credit.
An offer that will not be matched from DFS, Britain's leading upholstery specialist.
What's so special tonight?
Wait and see.
Everybody's heard about the word. The bird's eye chicken's the word.
Discover the secret of new bird's eye chicken en croûte. The flaky pastry hides a rich sauce and a centre made with succulent chicken breast.
The bird's bird's eye, chicken's the word. The bird's
Only chicken worth celebrating passes the bird's eye.
chicken's the word.
The Macro 25th birthday sale starts Saturday, and to celebrate, we've got 24 cans of Skol Lager for only $9.79, including VAT. All you need to join the party is your Macro trade card.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the fastest growing name in dog food, Butcher's Tender Cuts!
There are no artificial ingredients, they're natural, what's more. There's plenty of protein and vitamins galore. To keep your dog fit and healthy, there are no ifs and buts. You must give him what you think is good for him. Give him Butcher's Tender Cuts.
Butcher's Tender Cuts, meaty chunks in a delicious gravy. Is your dog as fit as a butcher's dog?
Those new yogurts, your supply. They're electrifying.
St. Ivel Shape Extra Fruit.
Good evening, now the news from Central. A family has criticised social workers after learning their son's body may have lain undiscovered for over 3 months. He was last seen alive in November when he cashed a benefit cheque.
This afternoon, Gillian Philpott was trying to come to terms with the horrifying thought that her son might have been lying dead since November last year. Police were called to his Wellington flat when a visitor noticed that a telephone directory left on his step hadn't been taken in. Inside the living room, they found 27-year-old Daniel Philpott slumped in a chair. Dozens of unopened letters were lying in the hallway.
We can't say how long he's been there. All we can say is that he was last seen on the 1st of November.
Daniel's mother says her son was a quiet man who had a history of mental problems.
Does it upset you that he could have been lying there dead for so long?
Does, yes, very sad.
What about Christmas?
Well, he wanted I didn't get a Christmas card, but I know he didn't like Christmas much, so I thought perhaps he just didn't bother to get any.
Daniel's older brother had tried to see him last year, but he never answered the door.
Who's to blame?
Well, social services. I mean, he had social workers, but they obviously didn't question anything.
We're very sorry to hear about it, and our sympathy goes out to the family.
Nevertheless, are you concerned that somebody might not have seen him since November from your department?
Obviously, one has to be concerned about that, and we will be looking into the circumstances. Our involvement was on an informal basis with Daniel.
Police say they're not treating Daniel Philpott's death as suspicious.
Detectives have tonight issued a warning about a lethal drug after 2 addicts were found dead. Tests are now being carried out on the killer drug.
The latest victim was found dead in a toilet block at the Guildhall Market in Derby city centre. He was 20 years old and a known drugs user. 24 hours earlier, the body of a 27-year-old addict was found in a Derby men's hostel. He died in his bedroom. At first, they were both thought to be overdose cases, but 2 deaths in 2 days is unusual. Police suspect a pure strain of drug is responsible.
I'm worried that out there is a batch of drugs that is of greater purity than what the drug addicts are normally used to. Now, they've got no way of testing for purity, and it could well be that there might be more of this drug out there. The addicts, who are very, very vulnerable people, need to be aware and to be extremely careful where they're getting their drugs from.
A message backed by drugs experts who say unsuspecting users are at serious risk.
If the concentrations of this substance changes, and if it becomes a highly concentrated substance, then the threshold of the drug breaks the limit and the drug becomes lethal.
Police are now waiting for the results of forensic tests to establish the exact nature of the killer drug.
3 children are tonight being praised for their bravery after throwing water over a man engulfed in flames. Kevin Bold is now in a critical condition in hospital with extensive burns after the house fire at Uttoxeter in Staffordshire. Finally tonight, camel racers in the Middle East are hoping for a leg up from an English company. Heart monitors used to test the fitness of racehorses have been modified to give the sheikhs a head start.
Far from the desert sands, Linda Phillips has been busy modifying her heart monitor for horses. Deep in the heart of Worcestershire, secret testing's been carried out at the West Midlands Safari Park on Humphrey, the 2-humped camel. And it's all for a very special customer. because Linda's been commissioned by a Saudi Arabian sheikh to produce a monitor for his racing camels.
Well, we've been selling monitors for horses for quite a long time, about 10 years. And I got an order to make one for camels from the Middle East. And I wasn't really too sure how it fitted on the camel. So Bewdley Safari Park kindly let me come and test it for free.
The sport's as big in the Middle East as horse racing is here. Prestige is at stake and anything that gives an advantage is eagerly snapped up.
With a heart rate monitor, you're able to test fitness levels and to know whether you're working the horse too hard or not hard enough. And so it does give the trainer an advantage to just see how fit the horse is.
Or camel.
Oh, camel, yes.
Now, did Humphrey mind all this going on?
No, surprisingly he didn't. I thought he was going to be a bit difficult to handle, but he's been lovely and very cooperative.
The camel racing season started last month and a prototype belt is already in use. The sheikhs certainly seem happy with it. Humphrey, though, looks like he's got the hump.
That's all for now. We'll have the next bulletin from Central News at 6:15 tomorrow morning, but from the Late News team, have a very good night.
Central Weather, sponsored by Stay Bright Windows. The clear choice, whatever the weather.
Hello again. Temperatures don't know whether they're coming or going at the moment. A frost last night, bordering on the mild for the next couple of days, and then straight back to cold, even snowy temperatures later on Sunday. I can't keep up with it. For now, it's relatively mild with a front pushing down from the northwest through the night, so no worries about a frost. Temperatures no lower than 4 Celsius. A few spots of patchy, drizzly rain making it into the north of the region towards dawn, and then patchy rain spreading down the region tomorrow morning. Now, this front's going to be fizzling out as it travels, so it'll be little more than a band of cloud by the middle of the day, with some brighter weather already pushing in from the north there, which will make things much drier and brighter for all of us for the afternoon. And temperatures an improvement just above the average. 8 Celsius is 46 Fahrenheit for tomorrow. That's it. Good night.
The Central 7-Day Weather Line, 0336 40 40 10.
He's romantic.
If Mr. Bendy wants to visit Schnappleland.
He's bold.
And who called the super stud chat line?
Incredibly sexist.
Remember, a man's castle is his pants.
Understanding.
Nicky, go upstairs. It's depressing enough when you're happy.
Offensive.
I'm not paying for mistakes. I've been doing that since the day I got married.
Russ Abbott.
Okay, everybody, gather round.
Married for Life, beginning Tuesday the 5th of March, 8:30 on Central.
I've tried it every day for 2 weeks now. And it's good. It's very good. Very good. It's extremely good. Extremely good? Oh, yeah. 2 weeks and it's good. Really?
They're talking about Kellogg's All Bran. It's very high in wheat bran fiber. Make it part of your complete breakfast for 2 weeks and see how you feel.
You should try it. I'm going to try it. Good.
Kellogg's All Bran cereal. Try it for 2 weeks. Love it forever.
It's one of the most underrated things in life.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's good news. DFS make you an offer that will not be matched.
Britain's leading upholstery specialist offers you a huge choice of sofas, settees, chairs and suites.
Factory direct prices on everything we make.
A guarantee of quality and free delivery.
And right now you can choose anything with confidence, paying nothing until September.
No deposit.
No interest.
No payment.
And then take 4 years interest-free credit.
An offer that will not be matched from DFS, Britain's leading upholstery specialist.
When a tall, handsome guy seeks a slim, blonde babe, it promises to be a brief encounter.
He's not coming, he's not coming!
Of course he's coming. He's just delayed. I expect something's happened to him. Mine hasn't turned up and I'm not crying, am I? I will do when I get home. I'll probably strangle the goldfish.
Josie Lawrence and Paul Merton star in Sealed with a Loving Kiss. Friday at 8:30 on Central. The time is set. The day is set. The place is set.
Can I challenge you?
The duel is on.
If you can't control yourself, sir, you shouldn't come on these debates.
Being the referee's my job. Can I ask you a question?
Verbal shots are flying in your Friday debate at 10:40. Central Weekend.
An investigation into an unsolved murder now on Central in the February edition of Crime Stalker.
On Crime